to Sew with Monty. I want to show you the continuation of the one pattern piece skirt. I've cut the skirt out. I've cut a front and a back panel, and I've sewed up the side seams, leaving an opening here on the left side so I could put it on the form. Now you can do this to yourself as well. You could sew the side seams up, leave a little space here, 7 inches, and put it on yourself. What I would suggest if you do this for yourself is to take a piece of 1/4 inch elastic, tie it around your waist, a little bit snug, so that this will hold the skirt up onto your waist, and just place it there nice and neat, and that way you can take a good look at it without having to worry about it falling off or getting uneven. So as you can see, the front is hanging really pretty. We've got the combs nice and evenly spaced, and I'm very pleased with it. I want to note one thing. This little dash line right here represents the high hip, 4 inches down from the waist. When I made my pattern, I found that when I opened it up for the full hip, it wasn't open enough to accommodate the 4-inch hip. So when you get your slashes open, and I'll show you on the pattern, you want to make sure that the 4-inch line as well fits the 4-inch high hip line. So that's an extra measurement you may want to take to fit. Now my form is a bit dated, and she's got a very round hip and a very small waist, and that could be the reason that this is happening. But this could happen on a human being too, so you want to make sure that you make sure your skirt is full enough to accommodate that high hip, and you may have to let it out a little bit more to do so. So anyway, the front looks really good. I want to show you what's happening at the side seams. Now at the side seam, if you notice, the side seam of the skirt is going forward compared to the side seam of the actual form. Now that's not ideal, but I want to show you the other side as well. See, it's a little bit forward, so they're both consistently forward. So how you would fix that, let's say if this happens on someone, now it may or may not happen, but if it does happen, there's an easy way to fix it. You don't want to shift the seam. You don't want to like go redraw the seam and push it back. That's not going to work. What you want to do is pick the back skirt up. Now if you notice, the back skirt's very flat in here anyway. So what I've done here, if you see these little marks, this is where I've picked it up, and all I did was take these marks, pin them together, and as you can see, as I pin them together, almost immediately it starts changing the landscape of the back of the skirt. So see, it already starts putting cones in there that you didn't have before. So if you start picking it up like this, see, it starts to rearrange the coning of the back of the skirt. This is a cone, so see how pretty it's looking there? So after I pinned this along here, I went ahead and marked it on both sides of my pin and dropped it back down so I could see how much I needed to adjust the back skirt. So it's 3/8 of an inch. So what I can do here is just pick this back skirt up from my 1/2 inch line to 3/8 inch. See, this is my 1/2 inch, and then right in between here is 3/8. And if I pick this up, you can start to see how it looks compared to leaving it the way it was. So let me get it all picked up here, and then I want to show you how it also affects the side seam. Now I go back to 0 at the side seam. I don't want to change that, it's fine there. But see, you can see when I do this how nice the coning starts to look. It's not as flat, I've got more depth, and it looks much nicer. Now from the side seam, if you look over here, see how it lines the side seam up to the form? So picking it up back here slides the side seam back over and makes it align again with the side of the form. So I didn't have to change the location of the physical side seam, which can really throw the balance off of your skirt. All you have to do is scoop whatever side is causing the problem, and in this case it was the back. So now we've got this line done, and this is corrected, and it looks pretty good now. Now this skirt wasn't really off horribly bad. I could have probably handled it being flat in the back. The issue I have is not having the side seam line up with the form. I didn't want it kicking forward. So that is when I made the decision to scoop it and change it to where it will be a back skirt and a front skirt pattern. So let's go to the table, and I'll show you on the table what we've done and take you to the next steps. So this is the original skirt pattern that we made, where we took the waist and the hip and split it open to accommodate the 8-inch hip. Now, what happened was, when I originally had the 8-inch hip, which would have been these two lines touching, these two black lines touching, I didn't have enough up here to accommodate my 4-inch hip. So when I saw that this wasn't going to be big enough, and it took, honestly, a muslin, I had to cut one and sew it and put it on and realize that, hey, this isn't going to fit my 4-inch hip. So I went back in, calculated how much more I needed at the 4-inch line, and opened it up once again, just like I did before, and added 3/8 in each one of these little sections here, so that I could have enough for my 4-inch hip, which made this even fuller, which is no problem. It's okay to be a little full, but if it's too tight, it's no good. So that was the first change here. Now the second change I've made up here in the red, this is my back waistline, the adjusted back waistline according to the front. So this was the original line that I was hoping I could use for both back and front. This now is the back waistline that I need so that it pulls it up and puts the side seam back in place. So I've taken these and I've simply taken this front and I've taped it to paper, just taped it right down to my other pattern paper and cut it out because there's nothing wrong with it. I just wanted something that wasn't so sliced up. So now I have an official front skirt block, A-line front skirt block, all inclusive. I've also measured this quarter waistline, the finish measurement, that's what the little F is for, and it's 6 5/8 inches. And I wrote it on here so that I don't have to keep measuring it. Every time I pull it out, this will be here for me, and if I need that waist calculation, I'll always have it. So this pattern piece is pretty much done for my block. Now, the back block is a copy of this panel, this working panel. I call this the working pattern here because it's got all the slicing and dicing on it. Except that I have traced off the red line. So this is my new finished back waistline. So as you see here, you can see the dashed line here. That is the new adjusted back waist on my skirt. I've also put the 6 5/8 because I wanted to make sure that these two were the same. Now this one was 1/8 of an inch bigger after I scooped it. So I tapered the side seam 1/8 of an inch all the way from here to the hem and just brought it in 1/8 of an inch so that they would be equal measurements. I want my waist the same front and back. And then the scoop is here, so now I know when I align it and sew it, it's going to look very nice. It's going to hang right and the side seams will be where they need. So now I have a back and front skirt block. Now this became two pieces because of the shape of my form. This may or may not happen to you. If you're doing it on yourself or a friend or a client, you may not have to adjust it at all. But if you do, now you know how to do it. And it may take a scoop in the front instead of the back. So it just depends on how they stand, how they're balanced, and how the shape of their body is. This is my finished block. So now what I've done, because I'm going to move into my skirt variation. So I've traced these off again. So the back has been traced off exactly like it is. I don't want to damage these. These became blocks, so I'm going to keep them. Because this way, if I ever need to make something, I simply trace it off on another piece, trace it off, and I can keep making skirt after skirt after skirt depending on the design. So now I've taken this, traced it off to the back, and on the front, I've traced it off, but this time, because we're making a wrap skirt, I folded my paper. See, so this is a folded piece, and then I cut it out like this from my skirt block, my front, and now my front block is an entire piece like this because I'm going to make a wrap skirt where it wraps over itself. So let's go back to the form and I'm going to take you into how to do the wrap skirt variation. So now the fun begins. We're going to get creative on this block. Now I'm using a marker. I suggest you don't do this on someone because it'll bleed through their clothes. Use chalk or use a pencil, a chalk pencil. I'm doing this marker so we can see it in the video, but I would highly suggest using chalk of some sort to do your marks on here. But what we want to do is we want to develop the lap over of our wrap skirt and how we want it to look. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to leave a 2-inch gap right here. So I'm just going to make a little mark, little marks here to remind me that I need space so I can tie my waistband. So I'm leaving a 2-inch gap here. And then I'm going to come down and I'm going to shape off how I want my overlap to be. And I want mine to have a little curve in it. So I'm going to come to about right here, high hip area, and I'm going to put a little dot here. And then see the cones, how they're sticking out? I'm going to use them to do my dots on. So I'm going to take this cone, let me push it in there, and then I'm going to come here. And then on this cone I want to be almost back to the hem. So this is going to get me started on the shape and kind of see what's happening here. And then as I go along, I can kind of go in between my cones. Now it doesn't have to be perfect. When we get over to the form, or to the paper again, we'll straighten it out. Because you can see right here, this cone's going to have to be a little bit lower right there. That one's out of whack. And then I'm going to go all the way back in and taper off to my side seam. So this will go all the way into here. See? Just that simple. So that's my coning in there. And that's my gap for my waist. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take it over there and we're going to fine tune this on the paper. And then I'll show you the next step. So now I'm ready to transfer my wrap skirt curve here onto my pattern. And this is very simple. You can use a tracing wheel, which is industry standard, a pattern making tracing wheel, which is very spiky. Or if you have a large pen or thumbtack, you can use this. Either one works. You want a piece of cardboard so that when you mark it, it perforates it nicely and you can see the perforation when you pick this up. So if you're using a pen, you just want to go along here about every 3/4 to an inch and just dot in your line. Now, as you come along here, you may find that some of your dots are out of whack here. So see, mine's going this way, but I'm going to go ahead and do it that way because when I draw it in, after I lift this up, I can come back and correct that and decide what I want to do there. So I've gone to the edge of my cardboard, so I'm just going to gently lift this up, slide it over, leave the weight here so that it doesn't move, and then we'll do the other half of this. So just pick up the pattern and the paper and just slide it over so it's back on the cardboard. See? Just like that. And then just smooth it back out and I'll continue on with my tracing wheel this time. So this time I'm just going to go in here. I don't use this tracing wheel and go fluid motion. I just want to do little dash lines because if I start pushing on it like this, I'm going to distort my fabric and I'm not going to get an accurate line. So you just want to go like this. So if you have one of these, it works too, but either way works. Now once you have this transferred, you just take your muslin, put it out of the way for a moment, and see, you can see the perforation. Now this is where I use the pen, and see how it was off right here? So I'm going to adjust it. So now I'm going to come back with a pencil, and I'm going to mark over these little guys. Now those are pretty apparent. But right in here I want to mark, and as I'm going, I'm straightening it out. If I see one that's a little off a little bit, then I straighten it out. When I get here, see, I have a change here. So what I'm going to do is mark off the outside edge of this, and I'm going to try to blend it into the original starting point of my pin mark. See there? Because I don't want it to go in and back out. That's just the way it was hanging on the form, and sometimes when you pull the fabric off, that's what you get. Now you can use a French curve, straight ruler, and a French curve or very curve to continue this off, and then we'll have our front panel. So let me get my tools here real quick, and we're going to do this. So you can use a French curve or you can use this. Now this will help a lot because I want to start off straight, and this is going to kind of show me that some of my points worked straight. Again, working with fabric versus working with a paper is much more stable. So now I can take the rest of my points and I can start blending them together with my lines. Now every now and then you want to make sure that you flip your French curve or your very curve, whatever it is, to get the most accurate connection of your points. And don't try to do it all in one, because It may or may not happen in all in one, but just turn it and move it until you see a compatible connection between all of your points. I just keep turning it back and forth until I feel like, see, that's pretty good right there, that I've got my points lined up. And you just go around through here doing the same thing. So maybe one more time this way, and then I'll probably have to flip it again. So we'll get a section in here and then probably have to flip it a little bit. Nope, gotta go back. So you want to be able to play around with your vary curve or your French curve and make sure that it's doing the right thing for your curve. So if it's not working one way, flip it over and do it the other. Now after we do this, we're going to add a 1/2 inch seam allowance for hemming. And I'm going to go back to straight right here. So I'm going to go right into here and straighten this out. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to come, so I'm square at the corner. So I'm going to lift that up so I'm square. I want to be square right here. So see, that's the line for my front overlap. Now I'm going to add a 1/2 inch here for hemming, and that piece is done. Then we would lay the back right here and take off. So we're going to find our back piece here for our skirt. And I'm going to put the side seam here. Remember, we have a 1/2 inch side seam, so we want to overlap it 1 inch here. So the overlap will be 1 inch, a half on this side and a half on that side. And then right here where this is coming in will be where my back skirt enters here. So I'm going to go here, and I can either go straight or I can drop it down just a wee bit. So I'm going to probably drop down just a little bit, reminding myself that I've already scooped out the back waist. So if I do this, I'll start off square again. I want to stay square. And then after I get square, I'm going to take my vary curve and I'm going to gently blend it off into the rest of my hemline right here. So let me move this one out of the way so you can see. See, I started high and then just tapered it off to there. So what would happen here is all of these will get a 1/2 inch seam allowance added to them. And that is the body of my skirt. So now we have our back skirt, and we've added the extra for the hemline, and we've added the extra on the front skirt for the hemline as well. This will allow us to do a 1/4 inch roll hem, or to turn it up a 1/2 inch serge and do a flat top stitch hem. Also what I've done is I've taken the 2 side seams here and actually laid them together as I would sew them. And I've marked a notch roughly 7 inches from the top so that I know that these two are in alignment when I sew them up. They're off grain and I don't want to sew them and get it stretched. So that keeps me aligned on my side seam. So basically we have our wrap skirt done. We cut 2 of these and we cut 1 of this on the fold. So let's talk about marking this. This is my grain line in the center front. So this is very important that you align this with your fabric grain line as well, parallel to the selvage. And you'll fold it over and cut 2 of these. If your fabric's not wide enough to do that, then make sure you leave it open and cut 1 face up and then cut the next one face down. It's very important if you cut it single layer that you face 1 down and 1 up. Otherwise you're going to end up with 2 right or 2 left sides. So that's very important. Markings on your pattern so that you remember what it is. You want to title what this is. This is the wrap skirt. This is the front. That's the pattern piece that you're using so you don't get confused. Size of my form. So this is the size I'm working off of. If you're working for a client or you're doing this for a friend or yourself, you want to put your size on here. On my personal patterns, I date them because I change in size. So if I know this was year, 2010 and this is 2020, I might need to go back and say, hey, let me cut 1 and adjust the fit because I may be different in 10 years. But that's just a little note you might want to make to yourself. But size is on here, and then how many you're cutting of this. So I know I'm going to cut 2, so you want this information on here. The word self means that that's the main body of fabric, and that's not really important here because everything is the same fabric. But let's say we had a contrast on this, something different, like maybe it's black up here and we had a white band around the bottom. Then you want to denote which is which. So self tells you it's the main or majority of the fabric will be cut out of this pattern. So that's the information you want on your pattern. Same on the back, except in this one we're cutting 1. Now it's really important to circle how many you're cutting so you don't get it confused with something else on here, because you've got numbers. You've got your 6 on here, and you may have other numbers if you have a number style number on here. So I like to circle my quantity so that I don't get it confused with any of the other numbers on my pattern. So the skirt part's done. Now let's talk about the waist. So basically your waistband is going to be the entire circumference of your waist, and I went ahead and left the 2 inches in there. So remember the 6 5/8 that this is? So I multiplied that by 4, which gives me 26 1/2 inches for my waistline. So what I've done is I'm going to cut 2 of these. This is the actual waist wrap tie. And I've made it 4 inches total, including seam allowance, in width. That gives me an 1.5 inch finished waist. So if it's 4 inches wide and you fold it in half, let's get this out of the way here. You fold it in half like this, now it's 2 inches. You take a 1/2 inch seam allowance, you've got an 1.5 inch waistband. So 4 will equal 2.5 inch finished measurement. Now, what this is it's the waist. So let's say we've got 26 1/2. There's 23, and then we're going to add 3.5 more on here. So this is the actual entire waist right here. So this would wrap around the body. The rest of this is devoted to being the tie. And you want, when you're making a tie of any sort, from the beginning of the knot through the bow and the tie sash, you need a minimum of 15 inches, a minimum of that. I've allowed approximately 20 inches on mine. I can always shorten it, but I don't want it too short. I think 15 might be a little short for a wrap skirt, so I've added an extra 5 on here. Again, I can trim it if I need to. So basically, we have everything we need. You'll cut 2 of these, and you need to mark this as such. Most likely you're going to have your grain line running parallel with the length like this, because this is the most stable part of your pattern. So I would run my grain line the entire distance of this. Now it's not necessary. There may be a pattern of your fabric that you might change this information and run it perpendicular, but most time you're going to run it parallel with the length. And then I'm going to do my information here. So this is my waistband, and this is my wrap skirt. So I know what pattern this goes to. This is also good because if you have a bunch of pattern pieces laying around, if you find wrap skirt, you'll know that those all go together. You can also use a number if you want to make up a number series and put a number there as your style name or number, either way. And then this is size 6, so we know it goes with this pattern. We're going to cut 2 of them because we need 2. We need to wrap it around twice, so you need to cut 2. And then we're going to, let's see, this is a waistband, 1, 2, 3, and it's the self. So you have 6 pieces of information, including the grain line. You've got what the pattern piece is, the style of the pattern, the size, how many you're cutting, what fabrication you're using, and the grain line. So there'll be 6 pieces of information on each pattern piece. This keeps you organized. It keeps whoever follows you, let's say you're doing patterns for hire, whoever's going to make your samples or go take it to production, they'll understand what your pattern means as well. So the next step is I will show you how to sew this up, and we'll make this adorable little wrap skirt and go from there.